Hello, everyone, and welcome to this next episode of the Social Club at the End of the World. This is an open forum. Everyone is welcome to join. I post the link on my Facebook page, which is public, on my Google Plus page, which is also public, and also on a video that we posted a few weeks ago on YouTube, which says instructions on how to join. I just posted in the description there. Soon we'll be posting it on radish.org. And I'm also meaning to get an emailing list going, which I haven't done yet. And here we are. So feel free to join if you'd like to join either this or a future social club at the end of the world. I'm feeling a little depressed right now, just with everything that's going on, and a bit overwhelmed. You know, we're just about at the equinox, and you know, we're staring down the barrel of a very hot summer. The Arctic is already heating up before there's even sunlight there. And this is just absolutely shocking. So, you know, Seattle, I'm in Whidbey Island, Washington, just north of Seattle. And the temperature yesterday felt like summer. There's been crazy weather everywhere. And I'm just starting to feel a bit overwhelmed. You know, I think on a lot of previous episodes, I've sort of been like really positive and rah, rah, rah. So I guess you'll see a different side of Jamin today. But anyway, with that as an inspiring introduction, I'm going to go on mute and let other folks chime in. Great to see you all. Welcome, everyone. And love to hear from you all.
Yeah, I'm Dan, coming from Chicago. And it's interesting, Jamin, that you're talking about kind of feeling some depressive energy coming on in light of how hard many people have struggled to try to get some traction to deal with the unfolding disaster. And yet, it just seems like it's kind of a Promethean kind of task that we're facing. I noticed myself, I think, in response to the similar dynamic, where I find myself, kind of saying, it just doesn't look like anything constructive is going to be done concerning, refreezing the Arctic, drawing down the greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere, maybe starting to talk about the necessity of birth control, because, we have much larger, there's things that could be done to maybe save the planet and kind of salvage things. So when you see that nothing seems to be able to catch on very well, it is kind of depressing, because you feel, like the emotion of sadness always makes you kind of feel hopeless and helpless, in order to get you to throw in the towel and just accept whatever the loss is. In this case, it's the planet. So I have felt, I find my mind, you guys know I'm going out to that conference in Las Vegas, next week, Dying in the Americas 2018. And, I'm going to see what those individuals who are, concerned with issues like, death with dignity, assisted suicide, those kinds of things, and see if they're tuned into what's happening with the climate. Because if things actually go to a runaway situation, everybody's going to be faced with how are we going to, pass out of our lives, and how are our children going to pass out of their lives, and our grandchildren, etc. And I think that the denial is just so strong, even among ourselves in a way, even though we all know for sure that we're facing something dangerous. We hope it's not terminal. We hope something could be done, but it's a real threat. And yet, it's very hard to resist trying to just go on with your life day to day and focus on the things that you normally would. That dissociation from the reality of death seems to be hardwired in. And by the way, you know, another thing for people to think about is, you know, practically everybody on the globe believes that we're going to die. Our physical body is going to die, but somehow we get to continue to live in the afterlife. I mean, all of the major religions preach some version of it, whether it's you go to heaven or hell, or you get reincarnated or something. And so in a way, it's kind of ironic. Most everybody believes that they're going to get to continue to go on anyway, and yet they can't face up to the actual kind of in your gut feeling that this is going to end. So I just wanted to throw some of those things out there, and I'm going to go ahead and mute out and let somebody else jump in.
All right. Hi, I'm Victoria. I am in Oklahoma, and glad to see you guys again. I'm the only woman on here, but I'm thinking somebody might join us, and welcome to all of you all that are watching. Please join. I found this group being somewhat isolated in Oklahoma, and that's an understatement. At any rate, made me think of a quote, Jamin, talking about feeling a little depressed or so forth. I found a quote by Edward Abbey: "There is no better antidote for despair than action." So for what that's worth, guys, another thing that I wanted to bring up, we were discussing last week or week before in regards to why we don't hear about it, why you don't hear it on the mainstream news, so forth. I looked it up what we were talking about. 90% of all media outlets in the United States are owned and controlled by 6 corporations. So I'll just leave that open for discussion.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jason. Yeah, I mentioned that quote by Edward Abbey before. I like that. And as far as despair and depression go on this subject, I guess I'm at a different point in the cycle. I kind of feel like I was really going through it a few months ago. And for some reason, I was actually like one of the responders when a guy had like accidentally drowned while I was in Costa Rica, and I sort of saw this guy in cardiac arrest, and it was the first person I ever really saw pass in front of my eyes. And I think it helped me in a way, rather than being sort of really upset in the beginning. You know, I think it actually kind of, like my whole trip in general, but also this being a part of it, kind of, I guess I'm sort of starting to come to terms with really just wanting to enjoy every moment of life that's left, really. And trying to enjoy it, even though I may have these anxieties. So I've managed to sort of, I don't want to say sweep them under the rug. I think like I've actually kind of gone through them and sort of had my depressed time and kind of cried about it and dealt with it in a certain way that I've come in my mind, I've come to terms with a little more. And I guess I also haven't been watching too much of the news on it, just because I know it's bad. And so I've been like, you know, I don't really need to watch this thing. I can pretty much guess in my head where we're at about this point. I'll check at some point. I'll do a little more check-in with some of that, but you know, I know it's pretty bad. But I hear you, Jamin. I mean, it does kind of suck to feel like you're spinning your wheels and not getting anywhere. But I think, you know, you got to find a way to have time for doing your activism and trying to wake people up, and time for just to go out and enjoy the world while it's still here. mean, there's a lot of people who don't go out and camp and enjoy nature, and at least I do that on a regular basis. I go to festivals, I do all this stuff. Even if part of me thinks, well, the world needs me while I'm gone, I can't leave, and it's kind of like the world doesn't fucking need you, like it's going on, just headed straight for the fucking cliff, whether you try to do anything or not. So in my mind, I've already kind of accepted the fact that I think, 10, 20 years down the road is going to look massively, massively different. And I've already accepted in my head that I want to learn how to grow food, even if that's in a fucking bunker under the ground or in some closed, atmosphere container, whether that be on the surface of Mars, because I have to leave all the crazy people behind. Not that people won't go crazy on Mars, but I don't know. I've just come to the terms with the fact that the living world is dying, and we're definitely killing it off. And short of like an absolute miracle of like countries and militaries and people coming together to literally save life on Earth, and literally like refreeze the freaking Arctic and start sucking greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. And maybe you would even have to include sending every drill company up to try to get as much of the methane gas into containers rather than the atmosphere. Because even if it was burned and released, it would be CO2 instead of methane. And, short of that happening, I don't see us really making it out. I guess maybe there's just some disagreement in my mind on what it would actually look like in the end. But, hey, I don't know. I guess I've just sort of come to terms with it. I'm in a different zone. But I think, you brought up a good thing about the media. I definitely think that's a huge, huge problem. And I've usually just said that I think corporate control, we don't live in a democracy in the United States. If you're voting for Democrat or Republican, you're voting for business interest party. It's the same party for the capitalist system in this country. And there's definitely people who are in control of it. And, I don't know, there's a documentary by the same name of this, Requiem for the American Dream, the 10 Principles of Concentration of Wealth and Power, Noam Chomsky. It's really good. You can watch it on YouTube, I believe, or on Netflix. It should still be on there, streaming on Netflix, but otherwise you should get it and watch it. It's really good. And then there's this book here. But in there, he kind of touches on that. He's already written another book, Manufacturing Consent, which was about the consolidation of media outlets and how they control the mass opinion and, how, they use PR and media to control the spectrum of opinion that's allowed. And if you're outside of that spectrum, now they don't really kill you. They just marginalize you. Oh, he's just a fucking nut. Oh, Chomsky, yeah, he's just a fucking, crazy old man. Don't listen to anything he has to say. But I think that he has a really great solidified 10 points about the concentration of wealth and power. So maybe we'll have a discussion on that sometime. Anyways, I'm going to shut up now. Someone else can talk.
Hey guys, this is Jamie. My first social club at the end of the world. I've been working with Jamin on some stuff unrelated to this. Calling from Cleveland, Ohio, home of a very algae-filled lake that used to be one of the greatest places to go fishing in the country. That we have the Great Lakes here, and just a simple fact. I'm no agronomist, but we got Chemlon and fertilizers and big pharma and everybody filling the ground with fertilizers, and our lake is now 30% algae every summer. Not to mention the carp coming in from the bilges and the zebra mussels. These are just symptoms. What you guys talked about here so far is just stunning. It's so clear. And in our lifetime, I'm a 53-year-old male. In my lifetime, I've seen the dissension of the late 60s and early 70s in my youth, the culmination of the first successful mixing of races without fire in the street, and now we've come 40 years and we're back to shooting at each other. And I am firmly I'm convinced, because I worked for the federal government and the state and local government in a law enforcement capacity, much of it deep undercover. And the government they're not in the business of solutions. They're in the business of identifying problems and continuing to support problem management. It's very much like medicine has become, and it's really become monetized by these corporations that you guys have pointed out. We are all literally, we started off as a hive 10,000 years ago, and people raped, murdered, pillaged, Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan, Alexander the Great, and we've come up to this apex pinnacle now where the elite have created institutions, educational institutions, and called for 200 years the best people, the best minds, pulled them out. The Howard Hugheses, everybody was doing independent, interesting things, Henry Ford. And over the course of 200 to 300 years now, we've monetized virtually everything. 30 years ago, I was laughing that we were selling each other bottled water. It was a hysterical joke in the early 80s. Who the hell is buying water in bottles that's coming out of the tap? Well, now they're driving us to the bottled water because they're not taking the lead out of the pipes. I just don't see these things as accidental. I just don't see them as accidental. And I'm not a conspiracy guy, so I try not to get caught up in that either. But the facts are still facts, whether they're real or alternative. You can call them whatever you want, but it's either too hot or it's too cold. Okay, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. Yeah, it snowed a little today, but all of the maple trees are starting to bud. Okay, their leaves shouldn't be anywhere coming out for another 30 to 60 days. My background before law enforcement was horticulture and botany. We're way ahead of the curve here. I got daffodils that are half a foot tall. I don't normally see till the end of April, way past tax day. So I'm no expert in anything except what I can see. I'm a really astute student of what I'm looking at, and what I'm looking at sucks. And Jamin, the depression, that's real, brother. Let me tell you, that's real. And it's the devil. Depression is the devil, and it will pull you away from your mission. It'll pull you away from your life. It'll pull you away from loved ones. And what Jason said and what everyone said is you've got to find time to do things like get in your kayak and just do things. Do things that you don't feel like there's time to do, because in the event we can't do shit, at least you did that. And if you die in the kayak thinking about how to make things better, that's way better than dying in the closet holding your goddamn AR-15 hoping the world doesn't come to an end. So what I'm seeing here is there's a lot of positivity, Jamin. And the thing is this, everyone feels this depression, okay? We got a girl from Oklahoma. She's like the only candle in the wind out there. They're all farmers. Everything's great, red state. Look at my tractor tires and this and that. And God bless them for growing our corn and everything. And I'm not taking anyone's beliefs away. It's not political. We're all bought the Kool-Aid. Everybody over 40 has been, we've been called into the herd, and now everybody under 20 doesn't even know what we knew 30 years ago existed. They literally live inside their phones, and that's not an accident to keep everybody looking down, not paying attention. No one's reading. There's no 20-year-olds with library cards. It's a thing of the past, okay? So their information is streamed through them, to them, and the generation today are becoming bots. They're living bots for the machinery, and that's exactly what's happening. So, Jamin, I'm of the opinion that you're 100% right on almost everything that you've brought up and talked about, which is why you're an outlier, which is why you're sitting in a cottage on Whidbey Island and not next to Bill Gates anymore, because truth tellers get slaughtered, okay? Truth tellers get eviscerated. We get pushed out. And so let's be the people on the out. And I don't know if it's in the Bible or what, but the meek shall inherit the earth. And I submit that we move forward as the meek. This is the conversation of the meek. We're not going to try to slay the dragon of these businesses that will crush us and get us audited and create all sorts of havoc. We have to just do it around them, because working in the government at all three levels, primarily, exclusively actually in law enforcement, criminal justice, I have been in the rooms where the meetings are held where they talk about don't say this, don't say that, blah, blah, blah. What I do know for sure is the government is exceptionally bad at solving problems. Unless they want to boost the economy, then we attack other countries. Everybody buys weapons. Some people die. Checks are written, and the economy gets ginned up because we need more steel for more tanks. So that's how they solve problems. And what we've done in my lifetime is taken every individual country, and through treaties and through meetings and through the Department of State, we've manipulated and pulled the levers around the country so everyone's rowing in the direction of a global commerce society, that if the super wealthy feel a glitch, it triples all the way down, and people at the bottom of the Walmart food chain lose the ability to sell their baskets for 30 cents a piece. So everybody is now bought into this. Everyone has to work. Jamie, what they've done is they've done the hive mentality, but not in an altruistic sense. The hive mentality exists now for the very few queen bees on top, and anyone else in the way is going to be pushed out of the hive. So we have to go around that. I don't think we can change that. That battleship is too big to turn around. And maybe if we do this right and get enough good people on board, we're going to be the meek that inherit the earth, because those people are going to take the very last trillionaire alive as the earth is coming to an end, is still going to be reaching for that last payment for the last SpaceX rocket and the last Tesla in space. They're going to be reaching, going, wait a minute, I could do one more thing to line my pockets, knowing that the entire currency system is going to become devalued. So they're going to shoot off to the next planet and try to mine that. So that it's almost become this insanity roller coaster that everyone's on, and we're all sheep. And I submit to you, Jamin, as the founder of this particular movement, we need to step off of their escalator and take the fucking stairs.
Thank you, Jamie. Great stuff, man. I love your passion. I love the way you think and talk. It's awesome. And no, I agree. And one thing we've been talking about, I've talked this over with Jamie over the last few days, and also with Michael on a video we recorded yesterday called Radish Singularity Episode 2, that if you look at, to kind of sum up a lot of the points that have been made up till now, is if humanity could somehow figure out a way to actually work together as one, like a beehive, one big beehive, right? That's just hyper efficient, totally cooperative, no competition, no violence, between the bees, etc., no hoarding, anything like that. Just everyone doing their part. We could accomplish absolutely amazing things. We could refreeze the Arctic. We could clean up the oceans. We could transform the economy. We could do so many things and have a completely different world. But the question is, how do you get people to transition from one modality of life, which is the one we know, which is utterly dysfunctional, to a whole different modality of life that has not even been designed yet, right? That we don't even know, we can talk about it in very vague general terms, but we haven't, designed it, much less have we designed the pathway to transition from the lane that we're in to the lane we want to be in. I've been thinking about this a lot the last few days. I've been reading this book, this wonderful book called Honeybee Democracy, and it talks about literally how the honeybees do it. And the honeybees, they exhibit a form of collective intelligence. So, for example, when a daughter colony needs to branch out and find a new home, it looks like we're joined by Adam. Adam, welcome. Looks like we got a new member here of the social club at the end of the world. I'm going to pause what I was saying so I can give Adam a proper welcome. And Adam, why don't you feel free to introduce yourself and tell us a little about yourself. Welcome, Adam.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me? You can.
Yeah, yes, we can. We generally mute our microphones because sometimes we get echo. But yeah, we can hear you just fine, sir. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I wanted to call in because I think that there is maybe one last chance left. And we all know that people all over the world are heavily influenced by all kinds of things, and they stick to their dogmatic principles, and their cold hard hands that won't be removed from their guns, blah blah blah. So my point I'm trying to make is that there may come a time here, there will come a time where everything crashes, and at that time, that may be the moment when they will listen. And we don't have a plan. I mean, if there is a moment that they will listen, we don't have a plan to tell them what to do. It just seems to me like we should be developing a plan, for a way. I mean, the reason they won't listen is because they automatically will say, well, that's ridiculous. We can't. For one of the things that I say is that we have to end all use of money. And money trumps everything. The reason we can't get anything done environmentally is because of money. And so everybody immediately dismisses that as ridiculous. Well, how about if we develop a hypothetical plan, a what-if scenario, that presents, well, if we did this and we did this and we did this, well, then we can actually find our way out. Or we would be on I call it the road to life. We would be on that pathway. And so that's the gist of what I'm trying to say. And I'll just stop right there for a few minutes, see what you say.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. I completely agree. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on this. But, my kind of central thesis around what you're talking about is that in order for us, for humanity, to develop a plan for a path forward that makes any sense at all, in the midst of this cluster mess that we're in, where we're just barreling over the edge of the cliff, my thesis is that we need to come together in a whole new way, and what we're doing right here, right now, is one step on that journey of coming together. And as you may know, Adam, I'm a proponent of a whole new platform called Radical Collective Intelligence, where we come together in this new way using human intelligence, human collective intelligence, which is what we're exhibiting right now, right here in this virtual room, but combined with layers of artificial intelligence that help the different participants connect. And so you can find like-minded people to come together and work on specific components of the solution. I envision a grand solution that is so multifaceted. It's probably way more complex than anything that's been developed so far. It's just theoretical at this point, but a plan to literally transform everything, to make use of everyone and every tool that we have at our disposal, because we're certainly going to need them to do things like refreezing the Arctic, cleaning up the oceans, sequestering carbon, transforming agriculture, food production, holistic land management. I could go on and on. But the critical first step is we need to come together and begin to work together and co-create in a whole new way. And that I propose, and for that I propose Radical Collective Intelligence as the vehicle to achieve that. But I want to hear from everyone, because this is for me, this is the conversation. How do we A, figure out the plan, and B, implement it, inspire people to get on board with it? And that is the central question. How do we come together? How do we formulate a plan? How do we do it? So with that, I'm going to go on mute and invite everyone to jump in.
Yeah, let me go ahead, Victoria. Let me mute out.
I just was going to tell Adam briefly. Adam, if you don't or haven't seen the book, The Impossible Conversation by Dean Walker, do you have that or seen it? If you haven't, I really suggest it. It's it's how to deal with business as usual, and it is amazing, filled with great stuff. And the other one I wanted to see if anybody has seen Active Hope. Are you familiar with that one, Jamin, by any chance? I see somebody. It's wonderful. It's how to face the mess without going crazy that we're in about the planet. So those are two that I just offer that I found to be really helpful. Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, I've said numerous times, I think at the social club and in other, you know, forums that, you know, the problem is that people have beliefs. These beliefs can be imprinted by authority figures, or they can just simply be imprinted by somebody repeating something to themselves over and over again. And this is a hardwired part of being a human being. You know, beliefs allow us to take actions without being interrupted by anxiety, indecisiveness. So once you believe something, it allows you to make decisions and take actions in a very assertive, straightforward way. So this is something that we have to realize is a real problem. Again, to take the simplistic example, if it were the case that Donald Trump truly believes, he's not just playing games, but he truly believes that climate change, particularly something like exponential climate change, is a hoax, that it's not something which is real. That allows him to make decisions and try to influence things according to that belief. And people have many beliefs at this point in time that are very problematic to getting any kind of traction. And unless somebody understands, kind of on a meta level, that, yeah, we all have beliefs, and the only way you can really get rid of a belief that's already been imprinted is to look at the evidence that actually contravenes, goes against your belief, and slowly let yourself maybe form a new belief based on that counter evidence. So when it comes to climate change, I mean, for example, all of us here, I think, have the belief that we are in probably exponential climate change at this point in time, and our time frame is rather limited. You know, we may only have a few years. We may only have a couple of decades. We maybe will have a longer frame of time. That's possible. You know, it's possible. But the thing is, you would want to, in a precautionary way, operate as if we only have a very brief period of time. We know what needs to be done. There are some technologies that theoretically could be implemented on a large scale if we were able to, you know, just simply marshal the resources and the will to do it. But as long as people continue to believe, like Donald Trump and a lot of others, that we are not really facing this kind of a danger, those who are in power, and I go back to, we mentioned it before, you know, even when the president or prime minister of Finland states when he's visiting Donald Trump, if we lose the Arctic, we lose the planet. And even that guy, who is something of an authority figure, cannot get any kind of traction. When somebody has a belief, they will automatically minimize or try to rationalize away the counter evidence. And it has, and if somebody, you know, when I worked in mental health, you know, for a long time, and everybody who works in mental health kind of knows when somebody has, you know, some sort of a, you know, fixed delusion, maybe we call it sometimes encapsulated, you know, maybe they believe the CIA and the FBI are after them, and everything is other than that is kind of okay, they will simply not give it up. The only way they can really give it up is to force themselves to look at the counter evidence as to why that's probably not happening, and to slowly let it go. But it's always an assumption in mental health that all you can do with people, if their delusions start to cause problems out in the community, you have to hit them with the pharmaceutical drugs, which will just simply take away their emotional reactivity to the delusions. They'll still continue to have them. And I know it's a minor part, but I think as part of radical collective intelligence, this particular aspect needs to be incorporated into the discussion. And I really, I don't know how that exactly could be done, but it's pretty common knowledge that, most people, for example, I mean, here in our country, we have the fundamentalist community, and they seem to, the way they see things, if God wants to save this world, God can do it in a heartbeat. If God wants to let things go because we're behaving badly, then that's what's going to happen. And those of us who've remained loyal to God and, the belief system, we get to go to heaven. And a lot of the people, for example, yeah, I'll check out. I just wanted to throw some stuff in there. I'm going to mute out.
Yeah, if I could, I'd like to respond to that. Yeah, of course, people are in their beliefs, and it's impossible to change them. I mean, there's so many beliefs, and here we are sitting in this room, and we believe, but we're just one little tiny, drop in the bucket. But when the proverbial hand of God crosses the sky, and everybody looks up and sees it, that's when, and when everybody's faced with death, that's when there may be that moment when we need to have a plan to give them at that moment. And it's like, and the way I look at it, and we need to be able to get our arms around it and present something that's that people can understand. And basically, Alcoholics Anonymous, they have the 12-step program, and I relate money to mankind as a drug. It's like alcohol is to or drugs are to the drug addict. So we need a 12-step program for the human race on the earth, and we need to present that at the moment, or be ready to present that at the moment when everybody will listen, or a lot of people will listen. And that, I'll mute out.
Okay, I'm going to jump in on that if I could. Dan and his the way you encapsulated that for us not in the mental health profession, I completely get it. What you just described about personal beliefs. That is a fundamental building block here that Jamin and I have talked about, and he's talked about with other people. But you nailed it because of your background. We have to identify those people that their beliefs are not going to be medicated away and believe in this approach. We need to create an environment where the people that already believe in a similar way that we do, or at least are willing to pay attention and join the conversation. And I don't know that it's necessarily a good use of time to try to be coming up with ways, like Adam says, to convince, let's call them non-believers. Because when it becomes violently clear that Adam's vision, which is all of our vision, there's going to come a day when everyone's going to look outside and go, holy fuck, they were right. And this, between what Dan said and what Adam said, I think is exactly where we need to start. And that is, Adam is taking a step past what Dan said. Hey, people don't believe. So what do? we need to create a plan to present at realization, the realization of either the people that don't believe or the organisms, the government agencies, when it becomes obvious that we have alternatives to consider as off-ramps. And that's what Adam, I think, is saying. And I think that's critical. I think we have to pull together the people that are willing to join this conversation. We need to tell our friends about it, their friends, people we may not like, but they agree with us. Tell people about it, ask them to join, give them the dates. Let's get people thinking. Let's get people talking so we have more ideas. And then Adam is exactly right. We've got to have several viable off-ramps. We've got to have one that makes the most sense. Maybe we don't agree with it, but it makes the most sense. One that makes less sense, but everybody can agree to, and one that might not make the most sense, but might be the most plausible. So we've got to have a potential off-ramp. So when people say, okay, great, you guys were right. Now what do we do? Do we do what Hitler did and have a 3-day orgy before the end of the times? Or do we come up with solutions? And I think Adam's right. It's solution time. And I'm just glad he brought that up. And I'm taking notes. And Dan, I can tell you from criminal justice aspect, listening to you talk about the breakdown of beliefs is so enlightening, because as a practitioner, I dealt with that every single case. Not in a healing sense that you did. I was the opposite of healing. I was the punishment guy. But it is factual that there is a huge amount of people, and let's say Donald Trump, whether you like him or not, makes no difference, okay? I don't know that he's either ignorant and doesn't believe it, or he's such a capitalist that believing it jeopardizes the massive cash flow. Either way, we do not have the ability to wait for that belief system to change. We can only bring the people in that are like-minded, and there are a lot of people out there like-minded that are wise, heavily educated, incredibly intelligent, and they're afraid to speak out because of where they work or who they're married to or who they voted for. And this is a place where they can come and please bring your ideas. This is exactly right, Adam, and this is how we've got to do it. And I'm going to mute because I talk too much.
I'm going to jump in there. I realize we got a new guy, Miles, but I did want to, we kind of got this ring here going on. I agree. I think it's solution time. I try to stay positive now and stay in solution-based. You know, once you can kind of come to terms with it's possible at the end, which is really difficult to do. I think it can be a longer process for some. And I don't even think I've come to terms with it. I've just maybe found a better way of not wanting to be depressed every day about it. But I think that several common threads, is it Jamie or James?
He goes by Jamie. I mean, his
all right.
passport, it probably says James, but we all call him Jamie.
It gives me hope.
And welcome, Miles. I want to welcome Miles.
Welcome, Miles.
Another minute goes by, and we look forward to hearing from you, Miles. Good. Back to you, Jason.
So it makes me feel good that we have somebody in your place, Jamie, who used to be enforcing these things, because it does show that people can kind of come from a background that we wouldn't really expect. And still be able to be like, well, I want to save the living world. I want to do something to save the living world. And I don't want to be on the continuation of the status quo train as the shit hits the fan. I want to come up with a plan. And something else you said was that, that the government's not going to fix it. We have to create sort of an outside group of people. Because if we try to co-opt the current system, it's going to fight us at every chance. And that's what a nonprofit in the current system is. Nonprofits are cleaning up the big shit mess that's been left behind by the for-profit world. And it's just not going to fucking happen. And I think that the collective intelligence that Jamie talks about is great. And I wanted to say one thing. Make sure, Jamin, when you're talking about collective intelligence, that it's all of us building this. We all have brought in ideas and things here, and we're all trying to shift through them and then get specialists in Like, if you want to refreeze the Arctic, none of us are scientists who really know how to fucking properly do that. But eventually we hope to have some of those scientists in the collective intelligence community working with all of us to work on that kind of a subject and break it down into those segments through your collective intelligence platform. And, you know, I think that that's how we create this plan. I think we start trying to implement the plan, but I think Adam also brings up a good thing as people come awake, although people have been talking about the awakening happening for a while and it feels like it never comes. It maybe finally comes when shit really starts to sort of collapse. Maybe even Donald Trump is helping Americans, I believe, wake up because they're like, this is fucking insane. Like, this is fucking insane. I can't believe this shit. You know, and I think that Jamie said another thing that's perfectly correct. We don't need to figure out how to convince the total non-believers. Fuck them. You know, like, we don't need to convince them, really. There's a ton of people who already believe this is a big fucking problem, you know, and maybe to a lesser degree than we do. But I think people are slowly like waking up to that this is something fucking serious. And, you know, some of you are a little maybe older than me. I don't mean that to be rude, but I have a kid and I'm in here. I'd love to see some younger people get involved as well, you know, because they're going to be the ones, unfortunately, they got to help clean this shit up. And, but I think, you know, we've got sort of a platform, and I know you were talking about picking something last week, Jamin, and I'm working on figuring that out with you and seeing, you know, I'm in the process of trying to learn how to grow food, which I think, you know, instead of kids being on their fucking phones, if they could learn at least a couple useful things like how to grow food or be an EMT or how to be a mechanic of something, then we have some real skills going forward. Anyway, I guess I can shut up now, but I think that my general is a consensus with, you know, Jamie and Dan, and I think Dan would be perfect to run sort of this thing talking about beliefs and talking about the psychiatric problems maybe brought on by when people find out that it may be very close to the end if we don't do something. There's going to need to be psychologists and people who deal with the mind and people who are just going to absolutely, their heads are going to explode when they really come to the realization. If any of that blockage in their head gets freed up and those ideas are allowed to enter, I mean, some people may be not able to handle it. So I think it's perfect that Dan can talk about that and beliefs. And, you know, I think that I think this kind of a group online can get somewhat of a templated idea, and maybe even people like Paul Beckwith will start hopping in, and, you know, maybe we can get Peter Wadhams to chime in or something, you know, and, you know, maybe eventually by just even doing this, even though some people comment in the comments that it's freaking useless, maybe we'll drum up the resistance. And this is it right here. That's why I'm still here, is I feel like, you know, at least if I can come to this and start working on something, at least I feel like I'm part of the rebellion, you know? So join the rebellion and let's make a positive plan for the future of humanity on planet Earth.
I'd like to,
if I could just throw in one thing about somebody chiming in. And way back, I remember Guy McPherson, who's done so much to explain, you know, what's unfolding. You know, he said that Steve Wozniak, who is kind of an iconic, I don't know if he's a billionaire, but you know, he's in that category, and that he, based on his analysis of Guy McPherson's research, decided to move to Tasmania, you know, because he thought that would be a safer place for him to be when things started to implode. And I think that somebody like that, who is kind of iconic and therefore is got a big platform to be an authority figure, ought to step up to the plate and admit that, hey, I moved down to Tasmania. I wanted to protect myself and my family from what I perceived to be the implosion of the planet based on Guy McPherson's input. Yeah.
Why don't you get his email and we'll write him a letter and tell him, invite him to come here and speak with us.
And I think that people like that need to be, if they won't step up to the plate, they need to be shamed, because it's real cowardice, to simply, I understand that everybody wants to, save themselves, save their loved ones and all of that. It's hardwired. It's understandable. But at the same time, at a certain, given the way things are going, you have to be able to overcome some of the normal anxiety or fear and to take a risk. And I think someone like Steve Wozniak ought to do that. I will compose a draft letter that I'll put out there, and you guys can clean it up or add to it. But I think it would be a good idea to actually give it to the guy, because he is somebody who believed Guy McPherson and actually took action off of those beliefs. I'm going to mute out.
I'd like to say something. I just Googled, how do we save the world? And this is going to be the question on the top of everybody's mind before long. And they're going to be Googling that. And and basically it comes up with a list of things you can do: recycle, use less water, blah, 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 just little stuff. But if they Google that and they go to a website that lists, what if scenario. Now, say the whole world moved together. Let's just say that this is what we need for everybody to get on board. Okay, we list that. That's the first step. And then we start listing steps, and we can employ scientists like Paul Beckwith is an excellent recommendation. I mean, he really knows. I watch him all the time, and he really knows what we need to do.
I don't think we'll be employing anybody. I think we got to get people who are purely volunteering their time. I mean, that's what I'm doing. I think that's what everybody here is doing. I mean, I think at the end of the day, if you're talking about money being the problem.
No, I didn't mean employ like hire. I meant just uses resources,
So you should talk to Jamin and hear more about, just collective intelligence overall. A lot of us have heard, it in detail a little more. But I didn't know if Jamin wanted to sum it up real quick so that he gets an idea, Adam gets an idea, and then maybe we could hear from Miles. Maybe he wants to chime in here.
Well, let's let Adam complete his thought, and then yes, I'd love to hear from Miles as well. Go ahead, Adam.
Well, I just think that, like I said, we need to have a website that has the hypothetical answer, that shows the road to life, that says what we have to do. If the first thing we have to do is all come together, then we say, okay, this is what we have to do. And then we have to block keep the ice from flowing out of the North Arctic. Then we have to do this, and we have to do this, and we have this 12-step program, or more. Probably more steps. But in this way, we can at least put it in a list and say these are the steps we have to take. Without that list, we're all just condemning each other. And I think it's wrong to condemn other people for whatever reason, because we are all reacting to this, and we're all human beings. Even rich people are human beings, and they're reacting to all this, and so I just think it's wrong to condemn anyone. We have to just go with what we can do. That's all I have to say right now.
Really good stuff, Adam. I'm really, really glad you're here. These are excellent points. you know, anyway, I'd love to hear from Miles. Miles, how you doing there, buddy? Miles is joining us from Canada.
I can't talk because I have a vacuum cleaner running here, so you guys go ahead and talk some more.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So I want to reinforce the point that Adam made, that the first step is coming together. And that's, you know, a really clean way of saying what I feel like I've been saying for a few years now, is we need to come together to form a collective intelligence, because this collective intelligence, supported by artificial intelligence, and that's really, you know, kind of a concise definition of radical collective intelligence. It's us coming together like we are, except instead of everyone coming to one big, you know, discussion room, virtual discussion room, we'd have myriad discussion rooms focusing on the myriad different topics that we need to address to come up with the whole plan, right? But the first step is coming together, and we've achieved that here today. There's 7 of us here. I think it's, I don't know that we've ever had 7 people at once. And there's 13 people watching right now as I'm speaking. And so our numbers are growing. And you might say, well, that's very slow progress, 7 people, however, you know, how can 7 people change the world? But if you think of it in exponential terms, an exponential is always very flat at the beginning. It's very close to 0. And then it rounds what's called the knee of the exponential, and then it essentially goes vertical. And to Adam's earlier point, as things continue to fall apart and it becomes increasingly glaringly obvious that this ship is going down, then I think people will be jumping in droves and saying, wow, okay, you know, what do we do? And so to the extent that we can, you know, build either the plan or precursors to the plan, and a space for the plan to emerge, to the extent that we can basically do what we're doing right now, all this preparatory work, then as people start looking for answers, they will be able to find us and be able to join our radical collective intelligence that we're co-creating here, if that's a fair characterization of what we're doing, which I hope it is. So with that, I'll go on mute. Love to hear. I just love that we just go round and round and that people jump in. So I try to be concise, even though I could probably talk for half an hour. So going on mute, and thank you all for jumping in and being concise.
Let me jump in.
I'll try to. Okay.
I'll be super brief. Everybody has friends. If you have a friend that likes birding or is a fisherman, a hunter, people that are working on a garbage truck, people that are tree pruners, every one of your friends that is touching something outside of your area, invite them here, because the birding community and the Audubon people are seeing changes in migration. The fishing people are catching fish they didn't used to catch, and other fish are disappearing, and they can tell you about water quality. So whether or not they're fully believers, if they're sensing a change, we want them to come here and share with us their input. I'm not in a river every day catching trout, but the people that are might have something to bring here. And the insect people, whether they're professionals or hobbyists. So just my thought is, in order to get this thing on the slow burn of a build, tell everybody about it. And Adam, you're exactly right. Everyone's right. We don't need to vilify anybody. If they're in, they're in. If they don't understand it, offer them an opportunity to come and discuss it. If they're adamantly against it, move to the next conversation with the next person. We don't have time, and it's counterproductive to get attitudes and name calling. That is exactly what this area and what we're trying to do is the opposite of. If we find people that are like-minded but completely from a different walk of life, bring them in. And if they like what we're doing and they want to participate, they'll stay. If they don't, they won't. And it's going to be a self-culling group of people that ultimately the people that are willing to stick it out will bring their ideas. And so that's what I have to say. I'm muting.
Hello, everybody. It's Miles calling from Calgary. Can you hear me very well? Good. Okay.
We can hear you just fine, but your background is so bright that you appear as a
nice
black silhouette. and we see the beautiful background. So we can't really see your face, but we can hear you just fine.
I'm going to close my camera because maybe it's because there's so many people on, but there's a lot of breakup.
No. Oh, gotcha. Okay, fair enough, Miles. Go ahead.
So, yeah, I'm pleased to be joining everybody. It's quite an emotional issue. One thing I would like to call for, though, is if we could all remember courtesy in our speech. I think we really want to attract a lot of people from a wide diversity of different perspectives. So just asking, for some thoughts to the courtesy of our speech, so people feel pleased to join in the conversation. One of the things that I came across recently was a gentleman who studied psychopaths to a large degree, and so maybe Daniel can talk to this. His name, he's an Irishman. I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but I think it's necessary for us to really think about why it is we're in our situation that we are. For the past couple of thousand of years, there has been this concept of Western civilization, Western thought, patriarchy. And it's not to condemn Western civilization or patriarchy. It's just we do have to ask, I think, did we go off kilter somewhere along the line? Because, today's economy is really run by the type A personality, the alpha male. And there's conversations about toxic masculinity. And again, there's nothing wrong with being masculine, but if there is indeed too much of a good thing, that's going to cause problems. And my thought for Daniel is, do we need to really ask if the reason these questions of the alpha male masculine toxicity isn't actually because of masculine psychopathy, in that indeed if there is a small percentage, even 1% of people who have a tendency not to, or basically don't have any feelings of empathy for others, the psychopath, have we allowed too many of these people to be, captains of industry, and that's why we've had repressed scientific studies that they knew back in the 60s that the CO2 was going to be a problem. So I'm just going to mute with that having been said, and maybe Daniel will comment.
Yeah, there was a guy who once, there's a number of books on, how do you identify a psychopath or a sociopath, etc. But I'll never forget, I was at I think it was a week-long set of workshops on sex offenders. And I remember one of the keynote speakers, I'm not going to mention his name, but he had a long history, really, of being a psychopath himself. And he had been able to elevate himself into, I think he got a degree in psychology, etc. And it was interesting. So he was talking about this very topic. And even though at the time he was presenting, he was still behaving in a psychopathic manner. But in any case, so he offered this definition. He said that the way you differentiate somebody who's a sociopath from a psychopath is that the sociopath will have loyalty, is capable of loyalty and some sacrifice to a very small group of people. That could be the person's family. It could be some sort of a criminal gang. But the sociopath would only have the ability to sacrifice or care about this small group. The psychopath only cared about himself. And many times a psychopath could pass themselves off as a sociopath for a certain period of time. The psychopath, according to this definition, is just simply somebody who is really dominated by the predator-prey dynamic, you know, where this person sees himself as a predator and everybody else is some, you know, kind of prey. And it's sort of rationalized by, you know, if the other person were able to do it to me, they would do it to me. I'm going to do it to them, you know, and I'm a realist in that way. So we do, in fact, have, of course, many individuals who are, you know, sociopaths or psychopaths who get into positions of power. I usually, you know, when I give a mental health presentation, and I'm doing it in Chicago, so I know that everybody, you know, most people that'll be at these things, you know, they hate Donald Trump. And I'll usually say, you know, he's does appear perhaps to be sociopathic or psychopathic. And watch what his family members, you know, if the special prosecutor goes after his family members, if he can easily throw them under the bus and just march right on, that's a good sign you're dealing with someone who is kind of psychopathic, intelligent in a lot of ways, but psychopathic. And there's been books written and there's journal articles about people who get to the highest levels of the corporate world, who tend to be very sociopathic or psychopathic. And it is part of reality on the ground. I'm going to go ahead and mute out.
I'd like to respond to that. There is no normal anymore. And who is the head of a corporation? Let's think about that for a little bit. Who or what really is the head of a corporation, and who or what is really controlling the world? I'll give you a hint. I've thought a lot about this. I've got a video out there on it. It's not human, and it's not an alien. It's a poison, and that poison is money. Money affects mankind like a drug. So the head of a corporation, if the corporation is supposed to make money, so if it doesn't make money, they fire the CEO and hire somebody that's a psychopath or somebody that will make money for them, no matter what they have to do. And his boss is the stockholders, and all the stockholders care about is making money. So all decisions, therefore, are based on money. So it's a weird concept to think about, but it's true if you think about it. All decisions, you know, are based on money. And the anthropologists tell us that when we lived as hunters and gatherers, essentially in the Garden of Eden all over the world, we made decisions based on 7 generations into the future. Well, now we make our decisions based on money. Everything is given a monetary value, and it makes us crazy. It makes us do things that are insane. I mean, this planet is our spaceship. It's like the Starship Enterprise. If you lived on the Starship Enterprise, you wouldn't set fire to the air filter system. You wouldn't pollute the water. That's insanity. Why do people do things that are insane? Because we are infected by a disease called money. That is the truth, the way I see it. And I'll just leave that for now.
So I'd love to chime in here. For a long time, I really thought that money was a pretty good thing to kind of gauge at and throw all my effort and anger towards. One reason I don't think I think money is bad, but I don't know that having a system of exchange is necessarily the evil thing. I would agree more so that having sociopaths, Donald Trump being one of them, and probably every Fortune 500 CEO is probably also probably a psychopath. Having a large majority of the people in our society being sociopaths and a lot of the people running it being psychopaths is definitely a big fucking problem. And I think that it's interesting because I saw this is a book. I don't know if you can see that. And it's basically arguing the baby boomers are sociopaths and they've only cared about themselves and only voted for their own self-interest, and they haven't given a shit about future generations. And I think when you were talking about the 7 generations down the line, that was not necessarily archaeologists talking about that. That was a Native American way of thinking, that, you know, you wouldn't do something now that's going to have negative impacts for generations to come. And I guess one thing that kind of also made me think that it's not necessarily the money necessarily. I think Alan Watts talks a lot about this, about there being different models of the world, like the ceramic model that's sort of based on the book of Genesis, and the idea that the world has been created sort of as our toy to just sort of use, and we view ourselves as separate from nature, and having the argument that you have to view nature and your environment and your surroundings as an integral part of yourself. And if that transition could be made versus, you know, it's just this automatic thing and we can pump as much trash into the ocean and air and never have it be a problem. Bring in more of an idea of that, you know, your environment is you. If you destroy your environment, if you poop where you're, I'm trying to not use any F-bombs or 4-letter words. If you poop, you know, you don't poop where you eat, right? You know, I mean, if people could take that more to heart and that really be, I guess what I'm saying is I think it's a deeper ideological thing than just blaming money. I do think that our current money system being run by the Federal Reserve and a private banking cartel of people who are willing to destroy everything, and it being controlled by all the other wealthy people is definitely a big problem, and the dollar sucks probably. I get that. But I think that it's a deeper thing in the head. And I think maybe Dan would agree with me on that. Maybe he thinks it's money too. But I just wanted to chime in there about the other people are talking about how a lot of people in our society are sociopaths and psychopaths, and that these people are hell-bent on destroying the world. And when I took my trip to Costa Rica, I was in the small town of Perdizcal, and we hopped on this very small bus. It was like 2.5 hours to get to our destination on a bumpy dirt road in this like 1970s school bus that's like, you know, the guy's shifting it and like sometimes losing the gear on the hill, and it would like jolt to a stop. And it was this terrifying ride, but like the community of people like all helped each other get the stuff on the bus and get the older people off the bus. And there really was this sense of community than I feel now that I'm home in Long Beach. So this sort of came up earlier with, you know, me thinking about this, that I think other communities outside the United States are ready and, you know, almost in a better position than the people in the United States because of our culture, our consumer culture, the craze for money, turning people into sociopaths and psychopaths who only care about themselves, and they're just constantly driven all day, focused on just, you know, making more money and worrying about them and their immediate family, and not worrying about the larger human family and the environment and the planet at large, is, you know, this overarching psychological problem that we all have. And that coming together and working together to solve this problem will really take like a, you know, a really, like, it takes a really big mental shift.
I'll jump in. I just wanted to say I agree. And it was the Native Americans. I'm a member of the Cherokee tribe here, and we do look 7 generations ahead. And most all indigenous people do. I spent some time in Africa. In some of the places the Peace Corps wouldn't even go. And there is a sense of community that I agree with you, Jason. I don't see here in a neighborhood at all. And I'm going to have to go, guys, but I just submit that it is the psychopathic greed rather than money, just per se money. But that greed, and I know Jamin's background and mine have been in a lot of corporate settings where that is how you're judged, is by money. But it is this way of life that we've set up. And I do think that many indigenous tribes, as you know, in the last 50 years have been preaching this, like, turn around, look back. We know how to do some of these things. And I submit that we will be turning more and more to that type of community as we see the events unfold. So with that, I'll see you on the next social club, and thanks for the new people. Enjoy it.
Thank you, Victoria. Great to see you, and look forward to seeing you soon. Yeah, man, so many good points are being raised here. You know, one of the things that I have been conceptualizing is that in order for this transition to happen, rather than kind of happening all at once, like all of humanity suddenly realizing, oh my goodness, you know, our collective behaviors are destroying the place, let's all pivot right here, right now, and go on to a new path. I see it more as a gradual evolutionary thing where individual communities at a local level will start to set a new example of living in a way that's radically different and that addresses all of their basic human needs. Because I think the disaster that's ongoing on planet Earth is largely a byproduct of, you know, normal, well-intentioned people being afraid, experiencing scarcity, and then essentially jumping into this very flawed game of hoarding in order to address their fears and their basic human needs and their fear of scarcity. And so those needs have to be addressed. That's one of the reasons I'm promoting the community cafes as a vehicle, as kind of a first step towards a community transformation, where we meet the basic human needs of all the people in the community. And with all basic human needs being met, wow, you know, suddenly I don't have to be afraid anymore that my needs aren't going to be met, that my family's needs aren't going to be met, that I'm going to starve. And now I can start thinking about other things other than hoarding and accumulation. And we can also do things at the level of the economy. I mentioned the CCC standard in a video we recorded 24 hours ago called Radish Singularity Episode 2 on my YouTube channel, where there are mechanisms where we can set about an economic transformation, where it literally becomes in vogue, it becomes stylish to buy compassionate products and services that are certified compassionate. And that has a very specific definition. Among other things, all profits go to ending hunger, funding the community cafes, so it becomes a funding mechanism, as well as being environmentally regenerative in everything that they do, as well as being socially transformational. So I think there are evolutionary, organic ways of growing and kind of spreading a new way of being. And yet, if you think about how rapidly things are going to need to transition and transform, if we're going to have hope of saving life on Earth, we need something much more rapid than just, evolutionary organic growth. We need to orchestrate a phase transformation. And I believe that task is so big and so complex and so delicate that it will literally need radical collective intelligence to achieve, of which this is an early precursor. And so I really see the key, as many of us have articulated on this call, that we invite other people to join our community as we put our heads together and have, focused series of video conferences like this one, but on focused topics, whether it's on the aspect of, psychology, or the aspect of how do we refreeze the Arctic, or how do we transform the economy, how do we grow the movement, how do we influence government, how do we get, this sector on board, this community on board, et cetera, et cetera. These are all tasks that the collective intelligence can address. So for me, it's been an ongoing process of letting go of this idea that I have to come up with whatever, it all has to make sense to me, I have to figure it all out, as opposed to I just focus on what I'm good at and contribute that to the whole, to the collective. And in that way, grow radical collective intelligence, which, like a beehive, there's no one bee that has to take on the task of figuring out where we're going to move to. It's a collective issue. So, and I think that once we hit a critical mass of collective intelligence, and I feel like we're getting close to that, we're going to see an explosion in our ability to figure things out as a collective, and our ability to grow this movement with the speed at which we need to grow it. So with that, I'll go on mute, and love to hear everyone's thoughts.
I'll just jump in here again. So with respect to psychology, I'm a layperson to the whole concept. In fact, it was just the other day I actually learned psychology. Psyche really is another word for soul. So a psychopath is a soul killer. And it's like, okay, wow, that really, all of a sudden, this word that was rather nebulous becomes really quite understandable. These psychopaths are soul killers. And this person said that there's no reasoning with them. Another person some time ago said, if you're dealing with a bully in the playground, you basically, once you realize that they're a bully and they're not going to change, you have to take your ball and you have to play elsewhere. So that's what we're doing here in this venue, and the concept of radical collective intelligence. One thing I would propose to you, Jamin, and we've had a bit of dialogue about this, exchanges, in that what we have to remember is that there's no correlation between IQ and morality. In other words, you can be a genius, but your morals may be in the toilet, right? So there's no correlation between IQ and morality. And this is where we have to ask ourselves about the wisdom of the mother. In Canada right now, we're dealing with an issue that's been under the radar for many years, and it's called missing, murdered Indigenous women and girls. So Indigenous women and girls have a much higher rate of abuse and murder and kidnapping and disappearance. And they're the least listened to segment of society. And stop to think about it. In fact, they may actually be the first people we should be listening to, because of their natural instinctive mother attitude, which is what we need to counter the male propensity for ideas and things. We men are hunters, and when that instinct runs amok, I think that's where we're in our situation here today. So just before I close on that thought, I'd like you to consider that perhaps at this time we might actually, or you, because this is your project and you're working with the software developers, is there an opportunity to call this radical collective wisdom instead of intelligence? And that's because, again, attribution to someone else. Someone once said that wisdom is the combination of intelligence plus love. So I'll mute and let you talk.
I like it, Miles. I like it. Really good stuff. Thank you. Go on mute.
I would just jump into, I have, while talking and paying attention, but at the same time, kind of multitasking, I've constructed a very brief draft of a letter to Steve Wozniak. I'm going to go ahead and Jamin, I'm going to go ahead and attach it to an email to you, and then you know, you can play with it or do what, and then maybe pass it on to others, and you know, see if there's some traction that could be gained there, because there is somebody who actually took according to action after researching what Guy McPherson has put out there. And I just think there's a moral obligation to step up and say, hey, I'm a believer. And it's me, Steve Wozniak, and I want to share this with other people. He may be able to get a lot more traction because of his iconic status in the United States than the president or prime minister of Finland. And so I will go ahead and I'll forward this to you by the latest this evening.
Maybe forward that on. I'd like to see it. It could function as a general letter to anybody we wanted to send it to, because I know at some point we did want to reach out, and if we actually get a network of different conversations going on, it would be good to start reaching out to people and try to bring them in.
Yeah, okay, I will do that. I'll go ahead and I'll send it out to everybody to look at. Sure.
And yeah, I think reaching out to some people would be good to get them in here and talking about it, try to pull their viewers in, get into the conversation, to find some more people who want to participate and do something instead of just nothing. And then, you know, it would help build, you know, thing. As far as changing the name to Radical Collective Wisdom or From Intelligence, I don't really care what the name is. I primarily care that we create a group of people that function for the purpose of the primary goal of, you know, it's a big fucking goal. I really don't care what the name is. I just think, the idea of radical collective intelligence, and it can hopefully drum something up. And that's all.
Hey, Jamie, I see you're talking and your microphone's not muted, but we can't hear you for some weird reason. Still can't hear you, Jamie. I don't know what it is. You may want to hang up and reconnect or something like that. Well, we still can't hear you, Jamie, or at least I can't hear you. But I can read Jamie's lips, and what he's saying is, I'm joking here. Adam, did you have something to say?
Yes. With respect to developing a website, or there where people can go to, because the question that they're going to have is, how do we save the world. And maybe the first step is that we all come together and think of like mind. So this website, I think, needs to be hypothetical scenario. So, I mean, there's too many things to argue about. So it needs to be a what if scenario. I mean, you know, if we all came together, and maybe that's the requirement. If we all think of like mind, then what could we do as a human race to fix our planet? Because and the biggest obstacle to all that is money, because money does trump everything. We want to, you know, cut down our carbon emissions. Well, why can't we? Because money gets in the way. So we develop a what if scenario. Just what would we have to do? And that would, see, humans we've never really tried before. I mean, we've always had all these obstacles to get in the way. Well, but if we just develop this scenario and says, well, what if we did this? These are the steps we have to do in order to survive. And regardless of whether we can do them or they're practical or anything, this is what we have to do. That's what I think we need to do. Thanks.
I totally agree, Adam. And in fact, I mean, that's a central tenet of radical collective intelligence, is that we get these multiple different streams or series of conversations going, where the people who are most competent / most passionate about any given thing, like one of the things we have to do is refreeze the Arctic, as Paul Beckwith points out repeatedly. I am so passionate about that, I can't begin to tell you. And so urgently, we need to convene a group of folks to begin to address this. I'm an engineer, and I've got a bunch of ideas as to how to do that. One is, you know, using constellations of blimps to suspend massive reinforced sheets of thin film reflective material and create an artificial mirror, particularly over those portions of the Arctic that are now dark blue ocean that used to be ice. And so we supplement what mirror still exists and is shrinking with an artificial mirror. Bounce that solar radiation back into space, cool the Arctic that way. Also use ocean barriers to deflect and prevent warm water currents from coming and depleting the ice from below. There are myriad ways that we can do that, but we need to get one central conversation going on refreezing the Arctic. Likewise, we need to have other parallel paths going. How do we transform the economy? How do we transform currency? How do we transform government and governance? How do we clean up the oceans? How do we sequester carbon? How do we transform land management? How do we become a collective? You know, how do we do this? How do we do that? So, I mean, there's literally going to be hundreds of topics, each of which is crucial. You know, think of an automobile with 17,000 parts. You know, a few thousand of those parts are absolutely critical. If you take away one of those parts, the car simply does not operate. So, like a car, our world is this complex, interrelated, interdependent, you know, machine is one way to look at it. And we need to master myriad parts of that machine in order to transform it. So, but coming together is the first step. That's why we kind of have this general, you know, support group meeting place called the Social Club at the End of the World, a provocative title just to get attention and get people to find out about it and join. But from here, you know, from this general assembly, we need to have breakout rooms that we can go to begin to, you know, figure out the various different parts. And then, of course, the General Assembly, one of the jobs of the General Assembly is to synthesize and say, okay, you know, we got work coming together on all these different parts, putting together the grand synthesis. the most urgent thing that we can do right now as a collective is this. Let's do that. Poof. Okay, that's done. Okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? And with an expanded community and turning this into a global movement, we can do this on multiple fronts at once.
I like that, Jamin. That was some good. And I want to say Adam, he actually owns howtochangetheworld.org. So he can link that in with the Radical Collective Intelligence. Jamin owns howtochangetheworld.org. But I was thinking, I said this before, and maybe I just need to do it now, figure out how I can pull myself together to do it. Or maybe somebody knows a video person who really wants to edit a video and put it together. But maybe there needs to be some sort of crash course, like short video / even a long version that sort of brings everybody up to speed on just kind of what the hell we're talking about. And I'm not, because I mean, if we just sort of say, oh, you should check out Guy McPherson's videos first, and then you'll sort of understand, that still doesn't encompass everything, because then people come in and they want to talk about all these different things. But like, for instance, Adam, I got turned on to this book early on, which I've talked about a bunch of different episodes. I've talked about this book, How Soon Is Now, by Daniel Pinchbeck. And it's actually quite interesting just to even look through like the contents here, because he takes you through how he thinks there needs to be a planetary initiation. He talks about the limits, and he talks, what the problem is, and then he sort of talks about regenerative solutions, God, love it, and revolution. And then the last one, it talks a lot about money as well. It's post-capitalism, property, money, and power. And then conclusion and action plan. And I mean, his action plan is very much, we need this like awakening on a global level. We need a lot of people to get involved, sort of something we've been talking about. And, but mainly if we had a video that kind of summed this up a little more, so that then people could siphon right into that place where they would be the most beneficial for the movement of going forward with taking positive action on abrupt climate change. That would, I think, be really useful.
Yeah, in the last couple of weeks, we've started a series called The Radish Singularity, and that's an attempt to kind of synthesize and what radical collective intelligence is and what the strategy is that we propose. Those are, but I mean, that's just a start. But tight videos that really sum it up, I think, are absolutely crucial. We're feeling our way. No one of us has all the answers, so we're really, just trying to get the community together so that together we can figure all this out. With that, it's 5 minutes to noon. I'd like to wrap up at noon. I'd also like to just have a little bit of a private meeting that's not broadcast and recorded. So if anyone has any final words, very concise, to say publicly and that are part of this recording, please do so now. When that couple minutes is over, I'll go ahead and stop the broadcast, stop the recording, but do please stay on, gentlemen, so that we can have just like a private meeting amongst us.
I'll just say goodbye first. Thanks for joining us here and watching it. I hope, you decide to take some action on abrupt climate change, even if it's just eating beans and rice and lettuce instead of a bunch of frickin' pork or beef burgers. Cheers.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you, Jamin, for allowing this opportunity, and I've been looking for a long time for a way to get my thoughts out, and I just appreciate it. Thanks.
Absolutely, and please stick around, everyone, for the meeting that we're about to have once we stop broadcasting. So nobody hang up, please. Any other last words? And thank you, Adam.
I think it's a great idea, and it's going to take everybody really transforming their thinking. We need to actually move ourselves from being the followers into the leaders. And it's really an opportunity to even transform ourselves as we transform the planet. Thank you, Jamin.
Absolutely. You're welcome. Thank you, Miles. Thank you all. Dan, any last words before we stop?
Yeah, just I think that there's been numerous really good ideas thrown out there today, and I'm enthusiastic about going forward and just doing what we can. I just want to remind everybody, I will not be here next Tuesday. I'll be back with the group 2 weeks from today, and I'll update on what I learned when I'm at the conference. And just gonna say goodbye, and it's been great.
Great. I'm really glad you raised that. I'm not sure I'll be here in 2 weeks because I've got the Sierra Club dinner next week in California. I'll be picking up Guy McPherson and hosting him for that. So TBD on whether we even meet 1 week from now, but 2 weeks from now, definitely. Okay, with that, I want to thank everyone, and I'll stop the broadcast and recording so we can have just like a private internal meeting here. So nobody hang up, please. And thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next Social Club at the End of the World. And thank you all for participating. Bye for now.